I started out thinking this week, or several weeks ago, I guess, that I would preach on the gospel today. There are pieces in there that I think need some work, but I can't go there because of what has happened in the last week and because of this wonderful reading from Isaiah. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines, of rich food filled with marrow of well-aged wines. And he will destroy on this mountain the shroud that is cast over all peoples, the sheet that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever and wipe away the tears from all faces. All. I love those words and I love that promise. So I've been telling you that I've been doing some reading in retirement, and I continue to learn and study and have fun reading things I didn't have time to read back when I really needed to read them for my job. So it's a funny how that works. Don't tell the bishop, okay? But I've been reading about world religions, and I'm just loving hearing about all the other religions in the world. Houston Smith wrote a great book, and I'm making my third time through it. I finally bought the Kindle version so I can just have it on my phone, because I think I'm going to want to read it for the rest of my life. But I continue to read and I continue to learn and discover interesting things. I think I got interested in world religion to begin with because I really do believe that there is this kind of a human DNA urge toward God. I think we all have an urge toward that something more that we intuit. And I wanted to look into how other cultures and other religions have dealt with that, and to look for things that we might have in common. And I found all kinds of wonderful connections and things that I think Christianity can learn from Hinduism, from Taoism, from Buddhism, from Islam. I think we can learn so much from each other, and so we need to be talking about our faiths together. But one of the things that surprised me was an interesting difference, something kind of unique about our tradition, and it comes to us in our Christianity through Judaism. But I was sort of surprised when I read that, somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 years ago, this little band who had escaped from Egypt, came upon the idea that God is present with us in the middle of history. Now, that doesn't sound that strange maybe to most of us who've lived in this tradition all our lives, but it was very, very strange for the time. There were cultures and religions and, all the people around where the Jews kind of rested and began to work out these ideas. The people around them, many of them had hundreds of gods. And the thing was, you had a god for rain, for sun, for food, for birth, for all sorts of things, for growth, for crops. And the thing to do was to keep the gods happy so that things would stay exactly like they are, so that things would balance and work, and the world would go on the way it goes. We want to make sure everything keeps happening. That was one kind of way to do God. There were other people, and we still have those religions, the Vedantic religions, the ones that grew out of the East, out of Asia. Still, there is a sense in those religions that our work is to attach ourselves to God more and more, to the divine, to the more, to the other, more and more and more, so that we can kind of be out of this world. Hinduism, you work at your religion so you don't have to keep being reborn into this world. There's a better place to be. And we sing about that and talk about that. And Christians, we talk about heaven sometimes as if we don't care much about this world. And it's all about some other place and some other time and getting someplace better than here. But that is not the tradition that we grew out of. The tradition we grew out of said, we're people and we were saved from Egypt by God, who joined us in this life, in our history, in this time, in the now, joined us here, formed a relationship with us, and has been leading us to a better place ever since. Now think about that as the groundwork for Christianity, in which God enters the world in a brand new way. To say, I'm now with you in a new way, a more personal way, and we're going to continue this work of transforming this world, of making this world the kingdom of God, and blurring any lines between this life and that life. That's our heritage. That's where we are. And so when I read this morning, in the middle of all that is going on around us, in the stories from the Middle East, the stories from Israel, and I hear that on this mountain I will make a feast of well-aged wines, a feast for all people, for all people. I will wipe the tears away from all faces. I hear the prophet standing in this place saying, God is at work among us. There is still more to come. Still, we're a little better than we were maybe. We've had hard times. There was destruction and ruin. This is who we are. This is where we're going. And the prophet of God stands in the middle to say, don't ever, ever deny that God is in history. That's our work today, I think, is to believe and to trust and to hope and to look for signs around us that God is at work in history, in this place between what we really are as human beings, which we know is so flawed today, and what God's dream for us is. So I ran across a fun little story about Islam in my reading that I hold up to you today. Does anybody know why do you know why the Quran says that you have to pray 5 times a day? It's a wonderful story. So you know that at some point Muhammad flew from Medina or Mecca, I don't remember which it was, to the Holy Mountain in Israel, the Temple Mount, but that's not what the Muslims call it. It's their own holy mountain, because Muhammad flew there and he was raised up into heaven, and he talked to God and came back and taught for 10 more years. And the story is that he went up to heaven, he got to the 7th heaven, and he talked with God, and he was on his way back, and he went through the 6th heaven where he ran into Moses. And Moses said, so how did it go? Muhammad says, oh, God gave me lots of good stuff. He said, you know, we're supposed to pray. I got to go down there and tell them we're supposed to pray 50 times a day. Moses says, oh, Muhammad, you got to go back and talk to God. I know these people. There is no way in the world they can pray 50 times a day. They're not capable of that. They just aren't. And so Muhammad goes back up and talks to God. He comes back through, and Moses said, so what'd you get? He said, well, I got him down to 40. Moses says, you got to go back. You got to go back. So he keeps going back, gets him down to 20 and then 10. And finally, he comes back through, and Muhammad says, I got him down to 5. I got him down to 5. Moses said, they're going to have real trouble with 5. You got to go back. Muhammad says, nope. I'm embarrassed to go back. I'm going to stop right here. We'll do the best we can with the 5. Now, I think it's a wonderful story from a tradition I had not heard. It's a story about God knows who we are. Moses, the prophets know who we are. And they hold open the dream that God has planted among us, that God puts in our midst, that God speaks not about some other world, but about our world. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines. In this time, as we all are fixed on the news, I'm guessing you're updating as fast as I am, looking at what's happening in this place that is holy for all of our traditions. It's holy for all the Abrahamic traditions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all value, revere, hold sacred the mountain that Isaiah is speaking about, and it is still today such a troubled place. Our work will involve certainly sending help to people, helping refugees, helping people now, but during and after the fighting. It involves all kinds of working with legislators. It'll involve working with all of the people who are trying to find a way through this. That's a big piece of it. I think the piece the prophet would call us to is simply this: never, ever, ever forget that God is with us in history. It's not about getting out of this life. God is with us here working in this time, and the promise is for now. Now, I was talking with Sadhu at the back door. We couldn't talk for 2 minutes without talking about what's going on here. There's so many strong feelings about what's happening in Israel. But I see in those strong feelings a little glimmer, maybe a little glimmer of God at work among us. I see people on the street having real conversations about how you do revenge, retribution, how you balance that with the need for safety, how you balance that with the desire to help people who are struggling, how you balance that with this sense of belonging in a land that you want to try to preserve, how you balance that with a history of having your people destroyed for no reason at all, how you balance that with having come into a land whose people you're now treating badly. People all over the world are saying, what are the many, many, many factors that have brought this terrible moment about? In a way, the terrible moment is shining our attention on what it means to be moral human people, in a way that it's sad that it's coming about through this event, but it's good that it's coming about. There are little bits of conversation, there are little bits of hope, there are little bits of people's ideas being transformed, and if they can't be transformed, there are people who are in conversation with good friends of different ideas, and there's growth, there's learning, there's questioning, but always, 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 in all of your conversations, I hope that at the center of it, someplace, whether you speak it or not, is the question, and where is God in the middle of this? This situation is teaching us to ask that question over and over and over again. And it reminds us what it is that this Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition of ours has offered to the world. The sure and certain hope that someday God will destroy on this mountain the shroud that is cast over all peoples, the sheet that is cast over all nations, and will wipe the tears from all faces. Hold that dream. That's your work in this fight right now. Hold that dream and find a way to live it. Amen.